Welcome to SS 5.4 Capacity. Capacity means how much something can hold, and we usually talk about capacity for liquids. When we talked in SS 5.3 about volume, sometimes volume could be for a liquid, how much something holds, but volume is also for dry objects, like remember the box of cereal? And so capacity is more to do with liquid. And we usually measure liquid with milliliters and liters, and that's what they've got here. ml is milliliters and L is liters. You want to use a capital L for liters because if you don't, it'll look like a 1. So make sure you use a capital L. So you need to describe the relationship between milliliters and liters, and you can probably do that with your kilohectodecablank decicentimilli chart. You know that milli and liter are 3 spaces away. So there's 3 zeros involved, or 3 decimal places. And so there are 1,000 milliliters in a liter. And you can see right here, 1,000 milliliters has the same capacity as 1 liter. The next one is selecting and justifying a referent. And a referent, again, is just an object that we have around us that is handy to compare that measurement to. And so I've got some pictures coming up. I can show you some reference for milliliters and liters. And then to be able to look at an object and say, I think that is about 50 milliliters, or I think that's about 8 liters, because you know how big 1 liter is and you have a referent in your mind. And then lastly, if I gave you an object and said, please measure this capacity, you would be able to fill it up with water or milk or whatever and say it is exactly 417 milliliters. So you'd be able to measure some objects and determine the capacity of those. So the indicators down here basically say the same thing as what was up here in this outcome. So knowing that there's 1,000 milliliters in a liter, knowing what a referent for a milliliter looks like or a referent for a liter looks like, using strategies to select a referent and then approximately measure something that's relevant to yourself or your family, and deciding what standard capacity is represented by your referent. So if you pick an eyedropper, you need to know that that's about 5 milliliters, and then you could measure something with an eyedropper. Estimating the capacity of a container. So if I brought in a bathtub and said, how much do you think it holds? You would be able to think, well, I know that a rain barrel is this much or a milk jug is this much. The next one, determine the capacity of a container using concrete materials that closely take on the shape, and then you have to kind of adjust, because if it's, for example, if you use beads, well, beads don't fit right together like milk does, so you might have to adjust your accuracy a little bit. And then being able to sort containers from least to greatest, explaining the strategy that you've chosen. All right, so here we have some objects that are common in everyday. You can see on this juice box, this is like the big juice box that has the twisty off knob. Sometimes they have that peel back knob like apple juice does. This is a liter, and so it's not the largest juice box that you would put in your fridge. It is 1 liter. And then moving down, we have our can of Pepsi here. This is 355 milliliters. And so we all know how big a pop can is. Some pop cans are not the same size. If you look on the label, it'll tell you. Sometimes they're 350 milliliters, sometimes they're 298. You kind of have to watch because all pop cans are not the same size. This is a bottle of nail polish and it is 15 milliliters. And so if you were using that as a referent, you could tell maybe how much a bowl will hold by how many bottles of nail polish you think would fit in there. And I know this is very small, but if you look on the eyedropper, it actually goes up to 1 mil. And so not all eyedroppers are the same size either. So you can't say that, oh, an eyedropper holds a milliliter, because there's bigger ones and smaller ones. But a very small eyedropper might hold a milliliter. Larger ones that you might use, say, to put medicine in your dog's ears or something, that would probably hold maybe 5 or 10 milliliters. It's hard to say. So you have to look on the label and see how they've got it marked. Okay, so here's a picture of a spoon with a milliliter of milk in it. And it says a milliliter, that is milli and liter put together, is a very small amount of liquid. So here's a milliliter of milk in a teaspoon, and it doesn't even fill the teaspoon. So when you think about a milliliter, you might think, well, that's just a portion of a spoonful, a small spoonful. So a milliliter is not as big as a spoonful. This great big jug of milk, if we looked real close way down here at the bottom, it's actually measured in gallons, which is interesting. So this picture probably came from the United States. We still use this same type of container in Canada, but you wouldn't see gallons on the label. You would see liters. And I believe this one is 3.78 liters or something like that. So roughly 4. So when you see a big jug of milk like that, it's about 4 liters. So on this measurement chart, you can see right here is the 3.8 liters, or roughly 4 liters, which is the same as 12.8 ounces, 16 cups, 8 pints, or 4 quarts. So that's using the old system of measurement, and it has liters here, which is metric, but you can tell this came from the States because they've spelt it wrong. See that? It should be RES. Anyways, they've got some common kitchen measurements, but I wanted you to look at this teaspoon down here. Actually, this is a tablespoon, sorry. A tablespoon, which would be bigger than the spoon up at the top of the page. Tablespoon holds 15 milliliters. That is more than you would probably fit in your mouth at one time of ice cream. Maybe soup, you could fit 15 milliliters of soup in your mouth. A cup. Now here it says 240, but on the cup measurement that I have in my kitchen, it says 250. So usually we say a cup is 250. And actually, if you measured it out, it is somewhere in between there, but to round it off and for easy math, most people say 250. So there's an example of where it's okay to kind of estimate. And lastly, here is an object that you see every day. What do you think the capacity of your water bottle is? How many milliliters do you think is in there? Do you think it's as big as this milk jug? I don't think so. So it's definitely not 4 liters. It's less than 4 liters. It might be about a quarter of that milk jug, so maybe 1 liter. Okay, so how many milliliters would that be? Well, we know from our first slide that there are 1,000 milliliters in a liter. Now, most water jugs are not 1,000 milliliters. They're not a full liter. They're slightly less than that. So if I had to take a good guess, I might say that this blue water bottle is 750 would be my guess. Now, again, not all water bottles are created equally. So there are water bottles out there that hold a liter. They're quite large. They'd be hard to fit in your backpack, but they do exist. And there's some smaller ones that might only be 500 milliliters, but you'll have to look on the side of your water bottle and see how big it is.